the first time anyone in Maple Ridge Estates suspected something was wrong was when a bright orange HOA notice appeared taped to every mailbox. At first glance, it seemed like any routine update, maybe about lawn maintenance or trash pickup schedules. But as neighbors stopped, reread, and frowned deeply, a strange quiet fell over the cul-de-sac. By the time the third dog walker reached the notice board, a small crowd had already gathered, whispering urgently. The notice read, effective immediately. Sidewalk access is limited to standard pedestrian traffic only. Wheeled devices, including skateboards, scooters, and wheelchairs, are prohibited. Violations will result in citation and fine. Wheelchairs. Someone actually wrote wheelchairs. It took exactly 7 minutes for everyone to conclude who was behind this. Karen Dalton, the notoriously strict HOA president with a flair for enforcing rules nobody remembered agreeing to. Karen was the kind of person who believed property value depended on uniform flower beds, identical mailbox paint, and strict silence after 8 p.m. every holiday season. She measured yard decorations with a tape measure to ensure they did not exceed the festive but tasteful policy she created. But even for her, banning wheelchairs was unthinkable. The first person to react was Mr. Alvarez, a retired veteran who used a wheelchair after a spinal injury. He stared at the notice, expression unreadable, until his wife snatched it off the board in disbelief. "She can't be serious," she muttered. "This has to be some kind of joke." It wasn't. Karen emerged from her house moments later, holding a clipboard, with the giddy self-importance of someone who believed she had just improved society. "Good morning, neighbors," she called. "I assume you've all seen the update. This is for everyone's safety." "For everyone's what?" demanded Nina, the neighborhood's most patient mother, who now looked seconds away from combusting. "Wheelchairs. Karen, that's discrimination." Karen adjusted her sunglasses with a practiced, dramatic sigh. "It's not discrimination. It's regulation. I've had multiple complaints about congestion on the sidewalks. People bumping into hedges, blocking driveways. We can't have chaos." "Chaos?" Mr. Alvarez repeated flatly. "Karen, I use a wheelchair because I have no choice. You can't ban me from the sidewalk." Karen only tapped her clipboard. "It's all in the new mobility guidelines." Page 3. Confusion turned to anger. A few neighbors pulled out their phones, immediately searching laws about ADA compliance. Others started filming, sensing that this was not going to end quietly. Karen, either oblivious or unconcerned, smiled stiffly as if expecting applause. But Maple Ridge Estates was not about to let a rule like that go unchallenged. This wasn't just another Karen policy, it was the one that would spark a community-wide uprising. Word of the wheeled device ban spread through Maple Ridge Estates faster than a summer brush fire. Within hours, group chats, text chains, and the neighborhood Facebook page were overflowing with disbelief. By evening, the HOA's normally dull monthly meeting had turned into a full-scale event. People arrived early, armed with printed legal codes, furious emails, and more indignation than Karen had ever faced in her life. The community center filled to capacity. Some stood in the back, others lined the walls. At the front table, Karen shuffled papers like a queen preparing to address unruly peasants. Her fellow board members, Mark and Linda, looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. "Let's bring this meeting to order," Karen announced, tapping a pen against her binder. "We need to talk about the ban," Nina interrupted immediately. "You can't prohibit wheelchairs from the sidewalk. That's against federal law." "It's not a ban," Karen replied smoothly. "It's a limitation for safety. And it applies to all wheeled devices equally." "That's the problem," shouted someone from the back. "You're lumping skateboards in with medical equipment." Mark cleared his throat timidly. "Perhaps we can discuss." "No," Karen snapped. "I'll explain. We have children who ride scooters dangerously fast. Joggers with giant strollers. And then we have larger devices, taking up the entire walkway. She gestured dismissively toward Mr. Alvarez, who sat near the front. Gasps filled the room. That's a wheelchair, he said coldly. It's not optional. Karen gave a tight smile. And we respect your situation. But sidewalks must remain accessible and uncluttered. If wheelchairs need special accommodation, they can use the street. The room exploded. The street? Are you insane? That's illegal. People get hit there. Phones came up. Someone went live on social media. Karen froze, finally sensing she'd crossed a line. But backing down wasn't in her nature. It's simply the most efficient solution, she insisted. Sidewalks weren't designed for heavy equipment. That heavy equipment is how he gets around, Nina said, voice trembling with fury. Your rule is discrimination. Period. Linda leaned into her microphone. Karen, we didn't vote on this. Karen stiffened. As HOA president, I can enact emergency guidelines. No, said Mark quietly. Not like this. The room murmured in agreement. For the first time, Karen looked genuinely unsure. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then, in a voice filled with resolve, Mr. Alvarez said, if you enforce this, you're going to get sued. And you're going to lose. Silence fell. Everyone watched Karen. She stared down at her papers, lips thinning. The meeting ended with no resolution, but one thing was clear. The community wasn't done fighting. The next morning, Maple Ridge Estates woke up mobilized. The HOA meeting had pushed the community past the breaking point. And residents were ready for action. By 9 a.m., a petition titled, Restore Sidewalk Rights, End the Wheelchair Ban had already gathered 87 signatures. By noon, it had over 200. Nina and a college-age neighbor named Tyler went door to door, explaining the situation to anyone who hadn't heard the full story. Every time someone reached the line in the notice banning wheelchairs, their eyebrows shot up as though they'd been personally insulted. She can't do that, became the neighborhood motto of the day. Meanwhile, Mr. Alvarez's granddaughter, Sophie, a digital media major, offered to help. She turned the footage from the HOA meeting into a short, polished video outlining the discrimination. Within hours, it had gone viral on local platforms. Comments poured in, outrage, solidarity, and people encouraging the community to stay loud. And they did. By late afternoon, a peaceful protest formed at the entrance of Maple Ridge Estates. Families, teenagers, veterans, parents pushing strollers, and even a few dogs in decorative bandanas held signs that read, Access is a right. Disability is not a nuisance. Sidewalks for everybody. At the center of it all sat Mr. Alvarez, calm but resolute in his wheelchair, holding a simple sign, Let me use the sidewalk. Cars slowed as they passed. Some honked in support. Others stopped to ask questions. A local newspaper photographer arrived, snapping pictures while interviewing residents. Karen, who lived just across from the neighborhood entrance, peeked through her blinds with visible agitation. Every few minutes, she'd march outside, ready to make a declaration, only to retreat after being confronted by the sheer size of the crowd. Around 5 p.m., she finally approached, clipboard in hand, heels clicking in stiff determination. The protesters quieted. Cameras shifted toward her like sunflowers following the sun. I'd like everyone to disperse, she announced with forced calm. You're disrupting traffic and violating community gathering rules. No, said Nina simply. Karen blinked. Excuse me. We're not leaving until you revoke that policy, Nina continued. You can't ban medical mobility devices. It's illegal, unethical, and we won't let you sweep it under the rug. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but the crowd erupted into a unified chant. Sidewalks. For all. Sidewalks. For all. The pressure mounted. News crews were on their way. Even the HOA board had stopped responding to her emails. For the first time in her reign of neighborhood rigidity, Karen realized she was losing control. By the next morning, Maple Ridge Estates was buzzing, not with chaos, but with purpose. The protest had made the evening news, and the surrounding city took notice. Disability rights advocates reached out. Lawyers messaged the Alvarez family offering pro bono representation. Even other HOA communities chimed in online, warning Karen that she had crossed a line no HOA should ever approach. The board called an emergency meeting. Not Karen, the board. When she arrived at the community center, expecting to lead, she found Mark and Linda already seated at the front, papers stacked neatly beside them. The room was half full with residents, all watching silently. Karen, Mark began, clearing his throat. We need to address the mobility restriction you enacted. She adjusted her blazer. Good. I assume we're here to clarify enforcement protocols. No, Linda interrupted gently but firmly. We're here to strike it down. Karen blinked. Absolutely not. The rule was enacted legally. The rule was enacted illegally, Nina said from the front row. She held up a printed document, ADA Accessibility Regulations. And you ignored every concern raised at the last meeting. You told a disabled resident to use the street. That alone could get this HOA sued into oblivion. Murmurs of agreement rippled across the room. Karen scoffed. Oh please. A little online backlash doesn't change the rules. This isn't backlash, Mark said. It's a civil rights violation. He tapped his folder. We've consulted with legal counsel. The HOA cannot ban wheelchairs. Ever. Under any circumstance. Karen's face reddened. I was trying to protect property value. People don't want. People want fairness, Linda cut in. And you've embarrassed this entire community. The board members exchanged a look. Then Mark delivered the blow. We're voting to remove you as HOA president. The room fell silent. Karen stared as if she hadn't heard correctly. You can't remove me, she whispered. I am the HOA. You were, Linda corrected. As of now, the motion is on the table. They voted. 2-0. Karen's jaw dropped. You're making a huge mistake. But the residents applauded, loudly, unanimously. Triumphantly. Mr. Alvarez rolled forward and looked her in the eye. You tried to take away my freedom to use the sidewalk, he said. But this community stood up for me. That's what real neighbors do. Karen stormed out, defeated, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. 2 hours later, a new notice went up on the community board. Mobility access restored. Wheelchairs, walkers, strollers, and all medically necessary devices are welcome on all sidewalks. This time, the neighborhood cheered.